Hello everybody and welcome to Documentation Not Included. It's Thursday at 7pm BST and we are live on twitch.tv/DNI stream. It's time for episode 2.15, Impersonating Developers. I'm Chris Seawalk and unfortunately Josie cannot be with us today. As everybody knows, she normally does the introduction and she's not here today unfortunately. But we are joined by our returning guest Gordon. Now Gordon, you have been on the show before. For the benefit of our listeners, please tell everybody what you do, where you're from and why you're here.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Yes, my name's Gordon. I'm a... what do? I do lots of things. In my work, I'm the co-founder of a company called Lineup Ninja, and I'm the tech guy. So I do all the development and all the ops on the platform. It's a platform for providing software for event managers, making their lives easier, saving them loads of time. And I'll do a bit more of a pitch at the end. In my good. In my other life, I also volunteer as a Time to Change champion, and the Time to Change is a charity challenging stigma in mental health.
Okay.
And I've been involved with this charity for 2 and a bit years now, in the community in Leeds. So I'm a big campaigner for trying to improve mental health in the workplace. And Chris was looking for people to come on the show today. And it was World Mental Health Day last Thursday.
Yep.
So I was participating in an event in Leeds. Have you ever heard of living libraries, Chris?
No, that doesn't ring any bells.
Can't say I had until I was asked to participate. But the idea is that you have an event, and rather than books, you have people.
Okay.
And then people can borrow a book, and that person is then read by them telling their story.
Okay.
So what we did as a group of champions was we all got together and we decided each of us put forward a book, like a short abstract on what they wanted to talk about. And we had all kinds of topics like depression, anxiety, bipolar, grief, and mine was called The Imposter's Guide to Imposter Syndrome.
Okay.
And
that is the topic for today, isn't it? So before we get into that, though, as I said last time, Josie will have my guts for garters if we don't do our icebreaker question. I've got one prepared. So pretty simple one today. If money, time, health, and commitments were not an issue whatsoever.
If only.
So, ideal world scenario, we can do whatever we want. What would you rather be doing right now?
Oh gosh. What would I rather do right now? I don't actually. This is a rubbish answer, but I enjoy doing this. Right.
See, that's what we're supposed to say as the hosts of the show.
I like opportunities to talk about people's mental health, and
right.
It really motivates me. And certainly, money does not come into that because it's very much a voluntary thing.
Well, charity generally is, you do. I said I volunteer for a local animal charity, and I don't necessarily do much for them, but when I help them in a technical capacity with a website and things like that. I'd never, ask for money. In fact, I pay for website hosting and things like that, just because, So yeah, fair enough. If this is one of your passions. I wasn't actually aware that you were, a champion for a particular charity until I looked at your Twitter yesterday, I think. I noticed it in the title.
Yeah. I think last time I was on, we were talking about GraphQL and Postgres. So
yeah, we were a lot more geeky.
Up in that conversation.
A lot more technical, a lot more deep, I think. What I would rather be doing.
What would you be doing, Chris? Yeah.
My answers usually surrounds not being at my computer in some way, shape, or form, because I spend so much time at my computer. I'd rather be on my bike somewhere hot, riding around and looking at things and discovering new places and new areas. I think that's one of the reasons I like survival games and computer games, and like RPGs that are big and massive, because I can explore, and I like doing that in real life as well. Of course, dear listeners, I would always much prefer to be here entertaining you guys, and talking about any of the subjects I always love to talk. But yeah, so yes,
anywhere in particular, somewhere hot?
No, nowhere in particular, because I like to go to new places. I mean, we went to holiday last year. I went to Santorini, for example, and I would never have considered that place, and I certainly wouldn't ever go on my bike in Santorini. It's crazy and tiny little roads. But it was, we just went. I discovered so much, and I got really into the history there and all the old ancient ruins. And there was a book in the hotel that was like, these are some ruins at Akrotiri, and I just reading about it, and I was like, right, we've got to go here next. We've got to go and do this tomorrow. That's the kind. I just like looking at things and discovering little paths that take me to places that I even just like going get on my bike and going a different route into town, and going down roads that I've never been down before. I just love that kind of thing.
Just set off and try and get lost somewhere, find an alley, see where it goes.
Absolutely.
Same. Love travelling. I love visiting cities. If there was something that I wasn't doing, this, then visiting some cities in the world, travelling around, meeting people.
I think I prefer rural over cities. But anyway, let's move on. Right, so let's get on to the subject at hand. As Gordon kind of touched on earlier, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome today. Now, if anybody listening, anybody in chat, has ever suffered from imposter syndrome, please do get involved. In fact, everybody, regardless, get involved, ask questions, because we're here to answer questions. So, to me, the definition of imposter syndrome in a professional setting, at least, is feeling like a fraud, feeling like you don't have the skills, the knowledge, and feeling that everybody else has more knowledge than you necessarily, and feeling like why am I getting paid this pay packet to I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scrabbling every single day. That's to me what imposter syndrome. So what to you is?
Yeah, exactly that. I'd say a pervasive feeling that you're about to be found out at any moment. That if you're just one mistake away from being rumbled as a total fraud in what you're doing, and that this feeling just develops over time, and it can become quite pernicious, and you really. It's easy to get into a situation where you think that what you're thinking is that everybody else knows what's going on, that and that at any moment the quality of your work will be insufficient, or there'll be a problem with it, and someone will find out, and that's it. You'll get sacked, or you'll be in disciplinary, or something bad will happen, and fundamentally it's that. But it's that when that happens for a long period of time. It can really build up over time, and I think it's like when you start a new job. Okay, it's pretty normal to feel like you don't know what you're doing, and that's entirely expected. But I think one thing that can happen with imposter syndrome is where, particularly people that have been in a role for a while, and particularly people that are high achievers, there could be real high risk of developing this kind of. Developing imposter syndrome.
So we're talking about people the high achievers, the people who have done very well in their career. They have attained a position of prestige in some way, shape, or form, and they feel like they don't deserve that role. Right? Yeah,
absolutely that. And they're held in high regard by their peers, but they don't necessarily believe that. People will tell them, "Oh, great, that's good work you've done. You really appreciate it in this group." But if you're suffering from imposter syndrome, then you don't hear that. Like, it's easy to think people are saying that because they want something from me, or they're just being nice, or you're just deaf to that kind of praise. Sorry, go on.
So to me that you don't necessarily have imposter syndrome. I think if you're deaf to praise, obviously that happens anyway. Some people are just modest. They don't really want, or they don't know how to handle praise. But we're talking specifically now. I did a little bit of reading on imposter syndrome before, so I'm certainly no expert. Hopefully that's where you come in here, Gordon.
Well, no, I'm no.
You've got imposter syndrome about being the expert on imposter syndrome. So I read somewhere that it's not necessarily classed as a mental illness or anything like that. It's a phenomenon. It's something that a lot of people suffer from. I mean, I read something like Michelle Obama suffers from imposter syndrome, and again, people who are in positions of power, positions of prestige, have got this inability to accept that they have done well.
Absolutely.
So can we give any examples? Have you suffered from this at any point?
Yeah, I'd like to share my personal testimony here. I've been working in tech for 20 years now. I started working on like a 24-hour tech support desk. It was providing frontline Unix and connectivity support. Worked my way up from there over the course of 17 years, getting various jobs, getting promoted. Working hard, doing a good job, getting promoted as you do as you go through your career. But then over time, it started about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Then I started to lose the confidence in the skills that I had as I became more senior. And in hindsight, it was not. What's the word I'm looking for? In hindsight, it was all. Now I can see it with perspective. I was not assessing my situation very clearly, but at the time, I really felt that my skills were not sufficient for the job I was doing, despite the fact objectively people were very happy with what I was doing.
Did you feel like you were losing skills because you were becoming more senior, or do you just feel like you didn't have enough support there? Or what?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a couple of things, really. I felt that there was quite a lot of change going on in the industry at that time, particularly for an operational point of view. I was an ops guy by trade, and ended up as infrastructure architect. But then this was kind of the dawn of containerization and DevOps.
Okay.
So there was a huge change there, and I've always been keen on automation and scripting, and doing deployment automation and stuff. But suddenly there became a huge number of new technologies. After the environments I'd worked in before, which is generally, it was Solaris when I started, but that migrated to Linux. But basically it was either HP or Dell equipment in a rack, and then we had VMware on. But then along comes cloud. So you've got your big cloud providers. Then you've got the container wars. So you've got Mesos, Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, and all of these technologies that normally, early in my career, I'd be like, "Oh, this is exciting. There's new technologies to learn." But where I was at the time, you're thinking, "Oh no, this is impossible. How can I know enough about all of these to ever make an informed?" Because I was in an architect role.
Mm-hmm.
How can I possibly know enough about these to make an informed architectural decision? And then that kind of led to a whole feeling of, I don't want to put something forward because I don't feel confident enough in what I'm doing. And that kind of became more pernicious and a sort of overriding doubt that I really knew what I was doing about anything in that role, really.
Right.
And ultimately, I quit work for a while because I just really wasn't feeling well at all. Didn't really know what was going on personally. And then I took another job about 6 months later, thinking, right, okay, I need to get back into work. Let's start another job. Then start the job, day one. Kind of all right, but by the end of the week, I was in a total mess.
Right.
I had to resign that job at the end of the week. I was like,
was that an environmental thing, or was that because of the imposter syndrome? Do you look back at it retrospectively? And
yeah, I think I had other issues going on as well, but certainly imposter syndrome was quite key for me there. It was a similar job to what I had before. It paid more money. It was a more complex environment in some respects, and I think I felt that I was not in a position to be good enough for that role. That there is no way I would be able to justify the money they were paying me. Like, how could I be worth this money? In hindsight, that's ridiculous because I knew a few of the people there before. They knew my history. And obviously I'd interviewed and they'd offered me the job and were happy for me to start. So think about it now. I think, well,
or in the previous role, you look at the way that you got to that position. You were promoted to that position, and you worked for that position as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. But all this kind of went to the side, and I kind of lost my objectivity because I wasn't critically analysing what I was doing, and I was just being overridden by doubt. But then this kind of imposter syndrome, as you mentioned, isn't like a mental illness, or it's really just a description of a few kind of things about how you might be thinking about things. But what it really can lead to is like anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And then, after this incident, I was signed off for work for like a few months, and then I needed to reconsider what it is I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And to stop doing that kind of big corporate architecture work, and then went off to found the startup that we now do, which is very much more on our kind of much more on the kind of basis in which I want to work.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of days I think we don't have a clue what we're doing, but
So that's an interesting thing to explore then. So do you currently suffer from imposter syndrome in any way? I mean, is it because you've got peers? You had peers, or now because you essentially work on your own? You have clients and you have a business partner. I don't think you have any more staff. Is that right?
Yeah, no, just the two of us.
So, do you feel like you've got imposter syndrome right now?
Now, no, but when I do feel it is certainly used to is when we go to exhibit our software at events. When we go to a few trade shows to sell our software. We've got a banner, get the laptop out, do some demos. First couple of times we did that, it was like, what on earth are we doing here? Who are we to be in here, like trying to sell our stuff?
But again, that's success. That's a success that you're associating that with. You've made an impact in some way. You've got to this position. Fair enough, you might have bought the stand, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You've got a success, and you're still saying that I'm not worthy of being here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. and now I don't feel that anywhere near as much. Sometimes I do. You have a certain conversation and you're like, well, hang on. But now we're more involved. I don't feel that so much. I think maybe that's a good way to think about how do you improve your situation if you find yourself in this, you find yourself struggling with imposter syndrome.
So before we move on to how to improve it and how to deal with it, there's a few people in chat that have said a few things. Avina, hello Avina, has said, I always doubt if I do anything right, and I'm pretty sure others can do things way better. And Volstrat has asked a question, kind of statement type thing, and he said, is imposter syndrome, generally speaking, something chronic? Because I sure do have days where I feel like I'm not skilled enough for the job and just faking it all. But on other days, I feel, well, not confident, but not inconfident. So it feels normal. It feels like he's doing his job.
Yeah. I think, to some extent, it's how you define that yourself and whether it's causing you a problem. It's certainly normal to spend some days and think, I don't have a clue what's going on here. I don't feel like I belong in this meeting or something. But the next day, be like, oh no, it's great, I'm on this. Like you've learned some new technology, or you've got into a new business relationship or something, and then things return to normal. But when it becomes a problem is when it is more chronic. And it's a situation that becomes more of a spiral. So
I think identifying that's important as well, figuring out, and you can't always self-identify it. If you've got a manager, if you're a permanent employee and you've got people that you work with, having someone there who's good at managing you or identifying your issues is very valuable.
Yeah,
in that
and
instance.
it's hard to because if you feel you're an imposter, you can easily feel that you can't ask for help. Because if you do, then you will be found out, or you will think that you will. Like by reaching for some help, you might think, oh well, I can't ask my boss because then he'll realise that I'm not worth this money I'm being paid. Which is, I would encourage anybody to reach out for help.
Absolutely.
Because that is just that is just your self-doubt talking to you to tell you that. Now, you can't do that.
There are two different types of people that you would reach out to. This is very black and white. Obviously, there's lots of shades of grey here, but there are the people who will support you, the managers that will support. Not necessarily managers. It could just be. It could be a colleague. It could be.
It is.
it could be people 3 times removed from you in the hierarchy. It doesn't really matter. It could be
Sure.
a mentor somewhere. It could be someone who works at another company in a similar role.
Absolutely.
Reaching out to those people who can support you and give you a reassurance, because essentially this is what it comes down to: reassurance and confidence. And then there are also people that you can reach out to who will come back, and unfortunately, they may laugh in your face, they may do things, but these people, it's not your fault in that instance. These people are not confident for other reasons.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Unfortunately, I mean, it may not help to say that, but it's also the reality of the world that these people exist, but those people aren't to be taken seriously either, you know?
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think if we start looking at how you overcame, because I mean, you said you obviously haven't fully overcome your imposter syndrome.
Yeah, still comes and goes.
For me, I understand that I don't have imposter syndrome, and I've never suffered from it. I'm sorry, but I know we've got this running joke on the podcast that I'm perfect. When you were talking about the cloud stuff that was coming in, the containerization, it kind of sparked a memory. I remember working for a really large insurance company, and I was surrounded by people who knew loads of things. You know, surrounded by processes that I'd never been involved with. I'd be surrounded by really clever people, and then other people who just seemed to be winging it. And I found reassurance in, one, I had a bit of a mentor, because it wasn't an official mentor relationship, but I had somebody that really lit a fire up underneath me and really got me going with development and really inspires me even now. I just send him a message every now and again, so just say thanks to him, because he's just, he doesn't even know he did it, you know? He was just loved what he did. And then there's another person who's actually sat opposite him in this particular job, and he was like a self-proclaimed cloud AWS WCF expert, and I swear to God, the guy knew nothing. He knew absolutely zero, and he just sat around eating crisps and being a horrible, disgusting slob. And it was just, to me, it was everything. It was the epitome of failure in this one particular guy, but he was successful. He earned a fortune. He was the lead. You know, he was the lead in one particular project, and that said to me, anybody can be successful, and it's all up here, and it's all in your head.
Absolutely.
So, sorry, I'm just giving you a bit of my experience there. I think because I was so young when that happened, I've gained a lot of confidence, and I've had to do a lot of fighting of battles, and I also got a lot of I was given opportunities, or I grabbed opportunities when I was very young. I was an IT manager at 16 years old, for God's sake, you know, and I was running a small company, but I have fought a lot of battles and learned a lot of lessons very young. I also had some personal things that happened when I was 9. My mum and dad got divorced, and I had my own solicitors and all kinds of things. I learned how to fight battles, and only recently I've learned how to fight battles better. So that's kind of why I've got my confidence. But how have you overcome that?
Yeah, it's
imposter syndrome. Then
syndrome. Yeah, just to touch on what you mentioned about the guy there who's like should be identified as an imposter, sitting there not knowing what he's doing but making the big bucks. He won't have imposter syndrome.
No.
Some people are just perfectly fine for just getting on and like being comfortable with not really knowing very much, and that's how they are. The people that do have imposter syndrome are generally the people who are very good, and the people that doubt that they're good because they know they have very high standards for themselves. I say, right, this is what I see a good, like, let's say, JavaScript developer. This is what my model of a good JavaScript developer is. I am a JavaScript developer. Do I fit that model? Because generally you'll create this idea of what this model person is. You know, it's just your idea, and it's very perfectionist. You have this idea of, and when you're looking at other people, you're just seeing certain aspects of them. So, like, if you're looking at other JavaScript developers, you're seeing them through that lens of that they produce this piece of work, like little bits of work, and you go, "All right, look at that. That's very creatively constructed," or I'd never thought about how that was done. And you build up this kind of, you can build this mental model of that's what's needed to be successful in that particular role by comparing yourself against what other people are doing in a similar role, and that can be very dangerous, because this mental model that you create of what's expected is extremely perfectionist. So,
and it doesn't take the full picture of the people that you're modelling it on. You don't understand everything that they do and everything they know and don't know.
No, exactly, and you don't notice their failures. Like you'll see their highlights, and you think that the bit that you see is additional to what you already know. Like you think, okay, I know this about, like, let's say, JavaScript dev. This guy knows this bit that I didn't know, and presumably he's really good at it, so he must already know everything else that I already know. And I think I have a little Venn diagram that you could possibly show, Chris.
I shall bring it up over my face. Oh, it's backwards. I'm going to have to bring it up over your face.
Right, okay. I'll give the viewers a break.
There you go. There, it's up there.
Right, great. And what this Venn diagram is showing is how you can be thinking about things when you have imposter syndrome, where if you imagine a circle representing what you think about something, let's stick with JavaScript dev. Right, this is what I know about JavaScript developer. Mm-hmm. Then you have an idea of what everybody else knows about this topic, which is a much wider circle that fully encompasses what you know. And you think, okay, so I know this. Everybody else must also knows what I know and more. Like, how do I ever relate to that? But that's because you're only seeing a very small aspect of everybody else.
Yeah.
What's really happening is, and this is the second section on the Venn diagram, is imagine there's a circle of what you know, and then what everybody else knows is similarly sized circles.
Yep.
And they all overlap to a little bit. So everybody in your team will overlap with you a little bit to create very independent people.
Yep.
And independent skill sets that have some overlap. So when you're working on a JavaScript project, say, then those are your shared skills that you're working on. But then also you've both got your own perspectives. You've got different coding styles. You've got different experiences of different technologies, and you're bringing different skills. And so the real help with imposter syndrome is to try and be is to think more clearly about what you know and what other people know, to appreciate this, that one isn't, what I'm trying to say, to appreciate that you all know very. So I've kind of lost my train of thought.
So the diagram says to me, when I look at this, the diagram says to me that we work better as a whole. We don't all know, nobody knows everything. And everyone is essentially scrabbling around, trying to figure out how to get to the next stage. They're all learning all the time. You know as much as the next person, but they may know other things that you don't. You may know other things that they don't. But to get to an end result, working together is kind of the way forward, I suppose. What if you don't work with other people, though, and you still suffer imposter syndrome?
Yeah, it's a challenge in a startup, as I'm the only developer on this account. And I think certainly something I struggled with, particularly early on when we were new as a project, having to make decisions about like what technologies we were choosing, what kind of approaches we were going to take. I didn't have anybody to validate that. But I think as I've overcome it is getting involved in communities out there. I've been to a few tech conferences to meet other like-minded individuals. And I think partly in our specific instance is just building confidence in the product. And as we get out there and we sell it and we get good feedback, then you think, well, okay, that's come because of the decisions that we've made, and we're now getting sales and bringing people in, and they like the product. So that feels very validating that the decisions we made are suitable for what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
doesn't mean if somebody comes in, they've got a completely different set of, they've got a completely different perspective on the approach taken. They might look at what I've done and go, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. but there's a million and one ways to do things.
That's the thing, isn't it? That nobody's going to come. There's no two people unless they've worked very, very, very closely together and agreed. They've developed their careers in exactly the same way for the last 25 years or whatever, which is rare. It's very rare. That kind of thing happening. No one's going to come up with the same solution. There are a million ways for me to be, for me to design a software system. There are a million ways for me to just write a function. It's nothing's right and nothing's wrong in this world. There are preferred ways to do things, and there are patterns and practices that can be followed, and best practices to guide you. But just looking at something like, I don't know, Agile, Agile is implemented differently everywhere, and everybody laughs at it and says, Agile is rubbish, or we don't do Agile properly. But everyone does Agile properly, because Agile is supposed to be implemented.
Supporting that team.
Yeah, it's supposed to be implemented in the way that your team can use it to its best ability. Yeah, you might be able to make improvements, but that's beside the point. I think the message here from me, anyway, is that you can't just say to somebody, don't worry. You can't say to somebody, you are not an imposter, because that's not good enough. They have to learn how to overcome those fears. They have to learn how to cope with those doubts.
Anxieties.
Yeah, and the anxieties. Because I don't have imposter syndrome, but I do still get anxieties. There's only a few weeks ago, I was losing sleep over... Maybe it was a little bit of imposter syndrome when I think about it. I was sat in bed thinking about lying in bed all night, could not sleep, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, completely unlike me, because one person that I was working with just literally, they'd hired me to come in and explain to them and train them on these new processes. And they weren't listening to me, and they were putting so many barriers up, and they were being so obstinate and quite rude in places, not just to me, but to other members of staff. And I was getting quite stressed about it, and quite, like, am I doing things right? It's just me. I'm the one who's telling them what to do. I don't have any kind of, apart from documentation that I read, and Google searches, and maybe speaking to other people like-minded on the podcast or in a networking event. Other than that, I don't have any validation. Well, so there was a tiny little bit of me that was saying, "Am I doing this right?"
Yeah. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there is no certification to say that you know how to do this job.
No.
You can get a certification for a specific technology or something. But that's not. You're in a job, and it's ultimately building trust and respect with somebody.
Yeah,
and it's that it enables the effective communication. It's not some background thing of like, oh, I've been authorized to talk on this topic. It's not like, okay, you've studied this for 5 years. Now we'll allow you to go and talk about Docker or something, whatever. It doesn't work like that. It's just you need to. It's about your own confidence in talking about that, and a way out of in imposter syndrome. The way out of it really is at its core. It's about trying to improve your own confidence in your skill set, and the way I find that useful is really challenging yourself and talking to other people about what you're doing. And trying to be objective about the feedback you get, and try and be realistic about what I'm trying to say. Talk to people about what you're doing, and acknowledge the success that you're having as you do it. I found it very easy to, and I still find this is still a thing I need to work on. Is acknowledging success. So I think it's very easy to do something and you think, okay, great, that's done. Bam, next. What's the next thing on the list? Like Kanban as an approach for project management, where if people don't know, the idea is that you arrange your tasks into priority, and then you're basically picking them off the top, doing them one at a time, and putting them through a process, which is fine, but it's unrelenting because you take one off the top, right? It's done. Take next one, done. Next one, done. And there isn't anything in that process really to say, right, stop, let's just take some time out and celebrate what we've achieved.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't look at that, it's easy not to acknowledge the success that you are achieving, and it's easy to discount it. Something that's particular in imposter syndrome is to find a reason for discounting your successes. So there's two particular approaches people might take to a task. I'm given a task by the boss, like, okay, you've got 2 weeks. Some people might procrastinate for this week and a half, or up till the day it's due, and then and churn it all out in one day. And somebody else might take the opposite approach and just work like non-stop, like too many hours in the week, to try and deliver this amazing outcome. And both approaches will deliver an outcome that's quite possibly perfectly fine.
And the same sometimes.
And the same, yeah, absolutely. But in both situations, it's easy to think like, oh, I like say you're overworked. You can easily think, oh, well, that's just because I've worked really hard at this. Like, I had to work excessively hard. If I don't keep working excessively hard, I will get found out. And not acknowledging that. And there's a lot of perfectionism at play.
And that also sets an expectation that you don't necessarily want to, or have mentally are able to keep up with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a problem. Especially in the startup, it's really easy to overwork because there's always more things to do, and there's always more. There's always more things on the Kanban board that we could be doing.
And then the procrastination option, we see that as luck, don't we? We see that as if we get a result from that, we've procrastinated, we've waited and waited and waited, and then we've leaving revising for an exam to the last minute. We see that as luck when we get a good result, because we don't feel like we put enough effort in.
No, exactly. we must have fluked it because the question came up that was something that we happened to know. Exactly that, and you discount that. It's like, rather than the fact like, oh, actually, I only prepped for a day and I aced it, so maybe that's quite good at it.
I think it's worth, and again, please tell me if you disagree here. I think it's worth focusing on the positives. If you have imposter syndrome, focus on the positives, but certainly don't discount the negatives as well, because they're just as valuable. The way that I tend to work is, if someone says something negative, as long as it's not just negative for the sake of being negative, and it's constructive, or I can take anything constructive from it, and there's a lot of analysis and kind of like assimilation I have to do with feedback to figure out how to improve myself and how to get better at it. But I certainly don't stress over that either. I don't worry about getting better at the same time.
Absolutely. I think accepting failure is key. As part of not wanting to ever be found out, you don't ever want to make a mistake. And it's fine. It's just human to screw up and get things wrong. That's fine. People aren't going to judge you for making a mistake. Ultimately, people make mistakes all the time. It's how you recover from that mistake.
Yes,
that matters really.
And if you repeat the same mistake multiple times, then there's obviously a problem. There's a learning issue there of some description.
Sure.
What's also quite interesting is so we've talked about how to ask, that we should ask for help rather. That asking for help, to me, is not a weakness. I have never seen asking for help as a weakness. Most of my jobs require me, as a contractor who comes into a business, or as a consultant that comes into a business, I fight a client if they try and say to me, right, well, if you need to get requirements, then those requirements, you'll do that for free, right? Well, so asking questions is the free process. Absolutely not. That is a service that I provide. There are people whose entire job is asking questions, and then that's a business analyst, sometimes a project manager in certain circumstances. Asking questions is fundamental to the operation of your role and the operation of the business and the solutions that you come up with. If you're a solutions architect, or even if you're a developer, speaking to another developer about, why did you implement this function this way? Why haven't we got 3 classes for this instead? Why have you put everything in this one class when we could have 3 classes? It's not it's not attacking somebody. It's
No.
trying to figure out the best solution for the product or the business or the team or whatever it is. And you don't get anywhere without asking questions.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, if you don't go in with that approach, then how are you going to make meaningful, helpful change if you don't understand the environment in which you're contributing to? No, absolutely, that's vital.
I mean, I can't think of an example where I wouldn't ask. Personally, I couldn't think of an example where I wouldn't ask a question. Can you think of an example where, or maybe something that you've experienced, Gordon, where you've not asked a question around something because you thought you'd be found out?
I'm trying to think of a concrete example.
If you can't think of one, it's all right.
I mean, in many meetings I go to when we do like ground rules, often you'll have one of the ground rules will be no such thing as stupid question, to encourage people to just ask any questions. And I think, particularly when I was going through perhaps my more difficult mental health period, and feeling like I didn't want to appear stupid by asking something, and then problem is you don't ask the question, and then it's easy to feel regretful for not having asked that question because you haven't like expressed yourself in that environment, and that then can then build on feeling like you don't belong there. Because if I felt like I belonged there, I would have asked a question. And you think, because I don't feel I belong here, I didn't ask the question. And that can kind of bounce around in your head a bit until you kind of think, no, hang on, I'm just being silly. Ask whatever it is you need to ask, because everybody else is there to help you.
I'm completely the opposite side of the fence to that. When I ask a question, if I ask somebody something, let's say, for example, I've gone in to do consulting. I don't know. Well, we'll use Agile and Scrum again, right? It's a fairly recent history experience for me anyway. So go in and you ask about Agile and Scrum. You ask them about what their existing processes are. Or you maybe, I don't know, maybe you're asking about the implementation of an algorithm. Forget Agile and Scrum. So this algorithm is very complicated. Why have you implemented it like this? This doesn't make any sense to me. There was one, I had to do an ordering algorithm for the way that sheets were printed in a warehouse. And it was the reasoning around it was madness, but they had to do it, and it made no sense whatsoever. It was backwards. It was 1, 3, 5, like the order was 1, 3, 7, 18. It was like Fibonacci numbers or something in the end. It's so ridiculous. And the reason they needed it is because the machine was a legacy that was printing these things was a legacy machine, and the way that the sheets came into the machine were a very specific order. And if I didn't ask questions around it and then say to them, well, I still don't understand, can you explain to me further why this is relevant, then I would have implemented totally the wrong thing and wasted everybody's time.
Absolutely.
That might be an extreme example where I think most people would have to ask lots of questions, but I would never hold back. I would ask more and more and more questions until I got to a point. Sometimes I do feel I'm not infallible. I do feel like, have I asked this question? Did I not just not? Am I stupid? Have I just not understood people? But it's still really fundamental for me to understand.
No, absolutely. And I think generally in my history, that's how I would have approached things.
Yeah.
When I've got myself into a bit of a situation and I find myself not asking the question that I needed to know the answer to because I didn't want to appear as an imposter. But historically, I got where I got because I wasn't afraid to ask people about stuff. Whether that's talking to the client to help them understand their requirements or talking to the team or management or whatever. That was all not really a problem. But then it became more of a problem, and then I guess I became conscious that I was doing it, that I was kind of not asking these questions and feeling a bit like a fraud. But I didn't really know at the time what to do about that, and that made it worse because I realised I was in this situation. I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't really know, and then that just led to more feelings of like anxiety and insecurity and generally in a bit of a kind of downward spiral because I didn't really appreciate at the time that what I actually needed to do was just to talk to somebody about it and reach out and connect with various people and services.
So we're coming up to the end of the show. I want to I want to ask you one last thing.
Sure.
If you were speaking directly to somebody who's in the deep throes of imposter syndrome, to the point where it's affecting the mood, the stress, anxiety, potentially developing depression or making depression worse or whatever, what would you be your number one piece of advice for them? Right in that, I mean, I know everyone's different, but
Sure.
how can they get themselves out of that funk? Because it is a funk to me.
Yeah. I would. My one thing I would say is talk to somebody about it. If you've not spoken frankly about how you're feeling about that situation to anyone, because you think, oh, I don't want to get found out, or like, what will people judge me? Like, I've got this. I have a particular reputation to maintain, so I can't be seen to be weak. Like, these are not reasons not to talk to somebody, because they're not valid reasons. As you said earlier, asking questions and seeking help is a very strong thing to do. It's you see people do it and you think, yeah, great, go on. It's very empowering. So if you find yourself thinking, oh no, I don't, I'm a bit stuck, who should I ask? Oh, I don't want to ask. I'd really encourage people to to find somebody to talk to. And you mentioned earlier, it could be like a peer at work, just a friend, a family member. You could, if you've got a really nice HR department, you could talk to them. That doesn't always go brilliantly well, but you've probably got a feel for how good your own HR departments are. Or if you don't have anybody to turn to, talk to your GP, and go and talk to them and explain how you're feeling, and hopefully you've got access to a good GP. But talk to somebody, and if you find yourself in an increasingly serious situation where you feel like you're not getting on top of this and it's becoming more and more of a problem, then ultimately the Samaritans are always there. If you can't feel like you can talk to anybody else, you can pick up the phone and call the Samaritans, and they will be more than happy to talk to you about anything that you want to talk about. They are there to talk to you, so they're always there to be reached out to if needs be. But yeah, just talk to somebody, please.
I'm a massive advocate of talking in general. I talked, if my wife and I ever have anything. I mean, the other week she was getting really frustrated and pent up because I was deep in a contract. I was really busy, spending a lot of time upstairs, and I wasn't doing the washing up, which I promised to her that I would do. On an evening, every evening or every morning, I'd do the washing up.
Sure.
Just one thing in the housework, and it was really bothering her.
Yeah.
And she spoke to me about it after bottling it up for ages. Sorted. I've done the washing up every day since. It's just something that, to me, from my perspective, at that particular moment, was not a high priority because I had so much work to do. And she was really getting bothered about it. As soon as we spoke about it, it was relieved. All the tension went. I didn't know, it just sorted it out. Not exactly the right example, but talking to people.
That's exactly it, isn't it?
Talking to people solves so many problems, because you never know. You might go out, and I don't advocate smoking, but you might go out for a cigarette break with somebody in another department, and you might mention it to them. Oh, I'm feeling I'm feeling like I don't really know what I'm doing in my job at the moment. And they might, in their department, they might be in the HR department, they might be in the finance department, they might say, you know what, I feel a little bit like that myself. And sometimes that's all you need to kickstart you and get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah,
and it is the right direction. It's the right direction to talk.
Absolutely. On my whole journey of mental health recovery has all been about talking to people and sharing experiences. It's very much the same. The work we do with Time to Change, it's run by people with lived experience, and their main mission is just people to share their stories in the community, and for people to help people feel that it's okay to talk. It's been amazing for me to go out and meet so many people that have been in a similar situation. Because at times you can feel very isolated and feels like, oh, I'm the only one feeling this way. But once you get out there and you start working through your situation by talking to people, you realise that it's just part of life experience, and there's so many people out there with similar fascinating stories to share.
Yeah, and all as valid as each other as well. And there's no such thing as a little problem. This is one of the things that when I go back to the washing up example, there's been more serious things in my marriage as well. But, what I'm saying is, I go back to the washing up example. She was so worried about speaking to me about it because she thought it was so insignificant and so small in comparison to the problems I was dealing with at work, that it wasn't worth mentioning. And I said, absolutely, it's worth it's worth bringing it up. It's bothering you. It's a tiny little thing, but it's really bothering you, and that's what really matters. And I said, talking's the first step, and then only by talking. You can't always do everything on your own, as much as some people believe they can do everything on their own. People like me, who are a bit control freaky, who like to do, and come up with everything and do everything. The problem shared. What's the adage? It's a problem shared is a problem halved. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm certainly having gone off and set up my own business with a friend. I think we've both got a certain amount of stuff that we'd like to just crack on and be able to do ourselves. So that's certainly a thread that runs through us. One thing I'd just like to mention, if you're, is part of the Time to Change campaign is in your mate's corner. Which is and part of that is a thing called Ask Twice. So in part of normal conversation, how are you? All right, yeah, and but they have a campaign that encouraging people to ask, actually, how are you all right? And particularly in the workplace and with your mates, just keep an eye out for people that do look a bit under the weather, or they look a bit miserable, or they're not engaging with like the conversation or something, and just have a chat and ask them if they want to go for a cup of tea or something.
See, that's the kind of thing I do.
Facilitate that conversation.
I not necessarily, I don't have that mantra in my head, but I do, if someone says that, they're okay and they're clearly not okay, I don't just ignore it. I will almost sometimes make it a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't mean in a really horrible, awkward way, but are you sure you're all right? Yeah. Are you, do you really want a cup of tea? Do you want a cup of tea? I'll continue to drive, if I've got a close enough relationship with them anyway, to continue to drive something out of them. And eventually, they do come up with them.
And that's often all that someone needs, is like that opportunity to have a chat and then talk about how they're feeling about things, and then they're off. So, yeah.
Okay, so we are at the end of the show. Thank you very much to everybody in chat. There's been a little bit going on. Thank you to Volstrat. Thank you to Uvina. And, of course, as always, thank you to you, Gordon. So
thank you, Chris. Pleasure.
Been brilliant having you on. If you've got anything to pimp, anything to talk about, any side projects or your business, please do so now.
My business is, it was a side project that became my life. But we're Lineup Ninja. We make software to help plan conferences and festivals. So if you do anything like that, check us out at lineup.ninja.
Is it just conferences and festivals, or is it any kind of event?
Well, any kind of event where you're when you need to gather proposals to speak. So what we do is we have a call for papers flow. So you can run a call for papers. People submit. You can grade them in various different ways. Choose which ones you're going to accept, waitlist, and so on. And then you can then turn those into migrate them into our agenda management. And there we help you plan the agenda for your day. And so you might have like 200 or 300 sessions that need to be planned at your event. And what we do is help you check that people are available at the right time. You haven't double booked somebody. You can just confirm that everybody's available and click at one button, and we'll email everybody. And a real key is automating a lot of the communication that you would do by hand if you're doing this with Excel spreadsheets.
See, I'm glad you went into a bit more detail there, because I actually thought it was events management in terms of managing the tickets for the event and bringing consumers in and stuff. So, interesting.
It's very, sorry, go on.
So I was going to say, Volstrat has just quite rightly put me on my place. He's doing Josie's job today, and he's told me that I've forgotten the RTFM, which I have. Yes. So the RTFM, sorry to jump in there, Gordon. The RTFM is a section where we have a whinge about something in the world. It doesn't necessarily have to be development related, before the end of the show. And I mean, have you got anything that you want to have a bit of catharsis on at the moment, Gordon?
Well, last night I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Because asynchronous programming is really hard.
It can be.
It can be. Had a defect reported by one of our clients where some information just wasn't showing up in where it was supposed to. And it looked like the data might have been lost, but from their point of view, because it just wasn't showing up. But then kind of digging into it, you think, right, okay, this code's been in use for a while now, and like really going into the details of what was happening. And it just turned out we were writing some stuff to the database, but also like querying it at the same time, and we were fetching it back before that write had completed.
Right.
And it's like, it's kind of thing. It's a common mistake when you try to do this async stuff, I guess. But yeah, it's just like, it should somehow be easier. I don't know. Wave a magic wand. Make this stuff easier.
Lots of mitigations you can put in place, but yes,
sure.
Specific use case, I'm sure, is difficult.
Yeah, it was just that one particular edge case of a particular situation that I hadn't really thought through. What's that?
So my RTFM is about events. Weirdly, I went to an event last weekend, and somebody was in front. My RTFM is pushing in queues.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm English, right, so I'm sorry, but we know how to queue in England. We know that there's a certain level of etiquette and there's a certain level of manners that you should have. Don't push in front of somebody. And especially if you push in and then get called out about it, because I'm a vocal person, as everybody knows. I said, so that's how it is it? When these people pushed in. They pushed in because somebody in front of us waved at them and went, oh, hello, and they just came in and they had a group of kids with them, and then there was an adult, but the adult looked like a child from behind, so I just thought it was a group of kids. And I just said, oh, is that how it is then? You just push in without asking or anything? Nothing. Absolutely nothing back from them whatsoever. And I said, well, what's going on with manners then? Are you not going to go back to where you were in the queue? Nothing. Right. Absolutely nothing.
Totally
what can you do? I mean, they looked at me eventually after and then there was a kerfuffle going on in front of us because they were stamping people's hands to get into the event. And yeah, it's just the rudeness of it, the pure rudeness of it, and it really got my goat. And one of the things I keep thinking back to and going, they could have just went, there were only 2 or 3 people behind me. I didn't care that they were in front of me. They could have just asked me, do you mind if we stand with our friends? I might have said no.
Fair enough. Yeah, sure.
Might have done, but I probably would have went, yeah, it's fine. But no acknowledgement. No, oh, sorry, we went back to the car and, we've come back. No, just blanked.
Yeah. Wow.
Rude.
Yeah, rude. I mean, queuing is pretty fundamental to life in this country, right?
It is. It is.
It's an art. If I can just have an extremely quick non-tech related whinge.
Yes.
Signalling at roundabouts. Oh my word! It's not hard.
How to use roundabouts? That's a good job. Well, I mean, I said Josie. Josie's lived in England for a long time, but Americans, they don't know how to use roundabouts.
No, they're not very familiar with them, are they? I was just like, oh my god, it's not difficult to indicate properly a roundabout. Read the highway code; it tells you what to do. That's the other takeaway. Once you've reached out about your mental health, or you've spoken to somebody else's, grab a copy of the highway code and read how to indicate a roundabout.
Yeah. I've got a lot of road issues. I mean, I'm a cyclist, so I'm a vulnerable road user, as they call us. And there are some the people that have got such a problem with cyclists, just in general, and the danger, they put lives in danger every day, riding so close to them and cutting them up. And I'm very clear with my signalling. I take the road when I need to take the road and make sure it's safe. I'm taking -1 second off your day by you standing behind me. Anyway.
Yeah. So someone pulls in front of you and then immediately slows down.
Yeah. I'll use that as another RTFM some other day. I'll have a good old whinge about road users that don't at least respect cyclists. But anyway, so I did cut in a little bit then when you were doing your pimpage. Was there anything else you wanted to pimp, Gordon?
Not really. Follow me on @GordonJ on Twitter.
All below his name.
Various mental health things. What else want to pimp? No, that's it.
Okay, good stuff. So, on to our pimpage. You can visit our website, www.dnistream.live, for links to all our social media channels and our Discord, which Gordon is in our Discord. He is a long-term and, in fact, one of the largest contributors, I think. You do get involved with conversations quite a lot.
To chip in when I can.
Very much welcome, because it's some good combos that go on in there. You can use it to contact us for any reason as well. If you want to be a guest on the show, you've got topic ideas, or you've got any questions, or anything else that you feel is relevant, or even praise. Or you need to reach out, in fact. If you suffer from imposter syndrome and you need someone to offload to or just say something to, we're not therapists, but we'll listen. You know.
Oh, absolutely. If anybody's got any comments arising from today and would like to chat further with myself and Chris, please do come in the Discord. We'll both be in there.
Or contact us on Twitter or DMs or anything like that. Honestly, I may come across like an obnoxious loudmouth on the streams, but I do my best to be a nice person in real life. So.
He is.
Nice. So that's it. Anything? If all that is left to say is goodbye. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.